engaging the community since 1970. This is WIS Awareness.
Good morning and thank you for joining us for Awareness. I'm your host, Megan Norman. We are here this morning in Denmark, South Carolina, home to Voorhees College and its president, Dr. Cleveland Sellers, Jr. This private, historically black college was founded by Elizabeth Evelyn Wright in 1897. In June, Dr. Sellers will step down after 8 years as president. Before he began this journey, Dr. Sellers has lived a long life of activism from a very early age. He marched and protested for civil rights. He was shot and arrested in the Orangeburg Massacre. His legacy extends far beyond his tenure as president. In a one-on-one interview, Dr. Sellers reflects on his life and career and shares advice for the future generation. Dr. Sellers, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you for having me.
So we're here on the beautiful campus of Voorhees College, where you have been president for the last 8 years.
Yes.
Now, at the end of this year, you've decided to step down. This will be your last year here.
This is my last year. I'm in my last few months of the year, the academic year. Yes.
Why step down now?
Well, I have had some health issues, and it was thought on the part of my family and the doctors that I probably needed to be in a less stressful kind of situation. And so I have little choice here in the matter. I wish I could take it all the way through to complete my contract, but it is better for me and my health that I do step down.
As you're in your last few months of this academic year and your tenure here as president, are you reflecting on your time here in this office?
Well, yes, I have reflected each year after serving each year, looking back and seeing what I could do to improve the institution, increase its capacity, and increase the number of students we have at the college.
And how have you been working towards doing some of those things?
Well, one of the things that we have to understand is, as an HBCU, HBCUs begin being underfunded. And so we have to talk about revenue basis in order to keep up with the increasing costs of education. Mm-hmm. And we also have to talk about students, and we have to talk about curriculum. So it's almost threefold. One is you have to be concerned about generating additional resources for the institution. You also have to be concerned about the curriculum. You also have to be concerned about going out and getting the students to come to your institution. Our students are generally having some financial difficulty. Mm-hmm. About 95% of our students are on some kind of financial assistance. We also find that most of our students come from South Carolina, and coming from South Carolina, they come from that area referred to as the corridor of shame, and it's not the area that you would find the best quality of education. So we have to take our students from where we find them, and in a matter of 4 years. So we spend a lot of time working on trying to identify new curriculums. For an example, we have an emergency management major now at the institution. We have computer science, and we try to strengthen those courses. We want to be able to provide the person an opportunity to either go to work or to continue in some kind of terminal degree program or a graduate degree program.
And when you talk about this threefold objective, it's certainly not unique to Voorhees College. We've seen these same objectives in many HBCUs across the nation. How do we still drive home the message, though, to maybe the greater society that HBCUs are still very relevant in our society?
Yeah, well, I think that's a myth, and that myth comes from the fact that in America, the slave African Americans were actually denied opportunities to get an education during that period of time. Matter of fact, it was against the law in South Carolina to teach a slave how to read and write. So there's always been pushback. And even during the period of segregation, you know, there was a pushback because no one wanted blacks, African Americans, to be in in an integrated session at a university. And so what we have now is we have a kind of rolling back in terms of our society, some of the gains from the Great Society programs of the 1960s, some of the victories that were won. So we see a kind of mood settling in, which raises the question of the relevancy of HBCUs. But what we miss is the fact that it is a valuable part of our community, and I'm talking about community in terms of the rural areas where we find Voorhees College in South Carolina in the country, because the HBCUs have worked with less for such a long period of time to do more. It's one of the best buys in college education. So if you put it on a level playing field, you would find that there is tremendous value in the HBCUs. And as we move forward, America is going to become more diverse as the world becomes more diverse. And the question is, how is it that certain minorities, segments of the community are going to be included and trained? So the HBCU sits right here, ready and willing to go and take that challenge on. But the critical piece for what we do is we provide an environment in which the student is affirmed. And that becomes very important. Yes, we nurture, but we also provide the space where they can affirm themselves. The identity issue comes into play. Who are we, and what are we going to do when we grow up, and all those kinds of things. Where are we? And we hope that through that experience and possibilities, they develop a social consciousness where they have to be concerned about things outside of what I need and what I am going to get in this world.
We are here at Voorhees College, where in just a few months, Dr. Cleveland Sellers, the civil rights activist and college president, will retire, leaving a lasting impact on the students and staff. More from our one-on-one interview next.
My most memorable moment with Dr. Sellers is his teachings of our history and his legacy that allows us to understand life as a college student better attending a HBCU. It's important for us to know where we come from in order for us to know where we're going.
His struggle has provided me the freedom that I enjoy today. So definitely I will forever be grateful to him for those struggles, and you can quantify it with money. So to Dr. Sellers, I say thank you for all your struggle and for my freedom.
What kind of preceded the violence prior to the actual day, February 8th?
Okay, all right.
So what was the overall mission? What were students protesting? What had brought about this violence?
Right. A bowling alley that discriminated against African Americans. The students, the youth chapter of the NAACP at South Carolina State, took that on as a cause in 1968. That was 4 years after the 1964 Civil Rights Act was passed that eliminated discrimination in public facilities. And they went down to the bowling alley on that Monday night, and nothing really happened, except they were told and met by the police that if they stayed, they would be arrested. And they kind of huddled, and they said they weren't prepared to be arrested on that night, but promised that they would come back the next day. So they all left the bowling alley, and that was the end on that night. The second night, Tuesday night, which was the 6th, they went back to the bowling alley, and about 13 students were arrested, and they were taken off to the city jail. The students who were left, who remained, weren't arrested, went back to the campus to let the other students on the campus know that there was arrest, and the student needed their support, and they needed to come down to the bowling alley, and they did. And on one occasion, they were able to catch students coming out of a movie that had been shown on the campus. And so that group poured down to the bowling alley also. All told, you probably had about 300 students who went down to the bowling alley. When they got there, the administrators at the college had already negotiated with the city police, and they agreed that they were going to let all the students out, and then they would let the students go back over to the campus, and they work on a strategy for what comes the next day. But the police had something else in mind, and so while the students were talking on top of the cars about, you know, we're free and we want you to go back to the campus and all that kind of stuff. And some students had already begun to drift back to the campus. A fire truck showed up, lights flashing, sirens blaring, and nobody knew where that came from. But the fire truck was provocative. You might remember that fire hoses were used against young people in Birmingham. You also might remember in 1963, the fire hoses were used against students at South Carolina State in Claflin. So it brought back very negative memories. Students kind of went over and got around the fire truck, and they flicked cigarette lighters and said, you know, where's the fire? Here it is, put it out, you know, that kind of thing. While that was going on, about 5 students, male, went down the wall. It's dark now. It's 9 o'clock at night, so it's good and dark. And they wanted to get to the bowling alley. They didn't see anybody in front of it, so they figured they could go down there and get in and say, you know, we actually got into the bowling alley tonight. Well, when they got down there, they didn't know that there were about 30 or 40 police officers, highway patrol and SLED, inside the bowling alley. So it was a push back and forth on the door. The door was a glass door. When the students saw and heard this movement going on, they all went down to the front of the bowling alley. And it's in an apex, it's in the middle, right here, of the building. The building's in an L shape. And so the pressure from all these students coming down there, the door busts open. I mean, the glass broke. And when the glass broke, the police came outside. They had their cars parked. They went into the trunk of the cars, and they had clubs, wooden clubs, about 3 feet, and they had rawhide handles on them. And they got them out, and they just waded into the crowd, and they just beat whoever was in the way.
And that was still 2 days.
That's 2 days.
Prior.
Yes, 2 days prior. So we get to Thursday, and Thursday morning I go and tell the press that we have a real serious situation here. We need some intervention. We need the governor to intervene. We also need to have more African-American leaders stepping up and saying that
This is a problem.
We need a problem. We need some help. We need some intervention.
Did any of that happen?
None of that happened. I remember seeing the group of students, I can't remember the number of students, maybe about 40 of them, standing around in a circle. And when I looked down, I was crossing the street, I looked down, I could see these helmets of these highway patrolmen, all 9 or 10 of them, I don't know how many it was, and they had their guns drawn. So my first inclination, you know, being in Mississippi and being in Selma and being in Alabama and being in other tight situations, my thing was to go and tell the students, move back, because you were in the line of fire, and you know it was night, and you don't stand a chance out here with these police. And I saw Henry Smith, and I went over and I think I said Henry, and at that point it was as if the gun's fire went off, and the darkness turned to light because the smoke from the guns. I mean, you could just, it was just unreal.
You were shot. Where were you shot?
I was shot in the left shoulder. It was a flesh wound. It went straight through. It didn't enter the body. But 3 of the students were killed. Now, 2 of them were South Carolina State students. One was a 16-year-old Wilkerson High School junior, Delano Middleton. Sam Hammonds and Henry Smith were the 3 who lost their lives on that particular night.
Coming up after the break, Dr. Sellers talks about the Black Lives Matter movement and why it's important young people continue the fight for justice. The conclusion to our one-on-one interview next.
His legacy is African Americans, especially males such as myself, to go to college, get a college degree, and become leaders within the community. by being in ROTC, I'm actually in the National Guard as well, so it's kind of prepared me a lot, become a leader, because I have brothers and sisters, and within my community, I go back home, and little kids look up to me and see, oh wow, he's doing something. I want to be just like him.
A great part of his legacy is being able to reinstill our founder's vision in us. Oftentimes, people will lose sight of what it is that you do or why it is that you do what you do. Each college has a niche, and each university has a thing that they do well. And I think that he has been phenomenal in allowing us and making sure that we hold the charge to basically nurture our students.
Do you believe the Black Lives Matter movement is being effective? Do you think it's making an impact?
I think the Black Lives movement is probably the most inspiration and motivation I've seen on the part of young African Americans, the millenniums, moving forward to try to address some of the same issues that I was on the front line trying to do the same kind of thing. I think they are relevant. I think they are very good, but I also know that what happens anytime young people get involved, the society would generally make it some kind of lark. For an example, back when the young students at the colleges, HBCUs, were going out on the sit-ins, it was a lark. It was the students who didn't have anything to do, and they were just going downtown to irritate the owners of these public facilities. And so I think that you're gonna see a discrediting, an effort to discredit. That's why we have to be in position to verify and to validate is what I'm looking for. Our young people and their efforts. So they have some time to go, but it's not a one-shot wonder. And so they have to deal with the Trayvons, and they have to deal with the other shootings and all those kinds of things, but they also have to deal with the absence of quality education. They also have to deal with all those other kinds of things. So it's going to take a while for them to get there. We were considered a kind of offshoot. Most of the other civil rights organizations for a long time didn't give us credit for doing anything and being anything. Right. But we were the ones who brought the young people to the table. We were the ones that got them involved and committed and doing different kinds of things. We were the ones who kind of moved them and moved the country on into Black power, and then taking on relationships and collaborations with other groups like Hispanic Americans and Cesar Chavez, and you see the Native Americans. And so we saw a kind of collaboration between those groups in order for us to ensure justice and peace and equality for all in America. We wanted to uplift humanity, and I think these students, young people, still want to do the same kind of things, and there's a burning fire and a burning desire. They have a social consciousness, and they're eager to let people know that they are defiant, and you have to be defiant, because if you don't, you begin to believe the criticism, some of the kind of smears that have been put on African Americans throughout their history.
You have quite the resume, and that really isn't the right word, but quite the rich history. And I think our time is about up, but I want to ask you one final question. As you look back over your career, your life of activism, your career here as a college president, what do you want your legacy to be? How do you want to be remembered?
I want to be remembered as somebody who gave their all to try to change society and make the world a better place for everybody. I want them to understand that I took the cornerstones of the African American community, faith, education, and service, and I tried to live within those three cornerstones for my entire life. And when we talk about faith, we're not just talking about faith in ourselves, but faith in God. We're talking about faith in ourselves too. You have to have that. And I see so many young people, African Americans, who have that hopeless look on their face today, as if You know, they recognize that we lost 2 generations of African American youth, and we got over 1 million African American men in jail today. That is something that we have to overcome. And so we have to talk about how we resisted, even in spite of the opposition and the overwhelming weight of the opposition, how much violence they could put on you, how much they could threaten you with all kinds of harms and injury. My whole life has been filled with FBI checking and background checks and all that kind of stuff. At some point, you just get used to it and you expect it, and you keep on living your life. That becomes important. You have to live your life, and your life has to be meaningful. And the legacy is that I did my best with what I had, and I never turned around. I faced every issue as it came, and I expected those who were around me to do the same kind of thing. And I worked very hard to make young people step onto the pages of history also, and make a difference and make a change, make a better world. That's what we want.
We'll be right back with a final thought. Through threats, attacks, and arson, the founder of Voorhees College, Elizabeth Evelyn Wright, stayed true to her mission of educating the marginalized and those considered less than or second class to the rest of society. Her tenacity should be a lesson to us all to keep striving for greatness, and it starts with education. Stay inspired, stay determined, and stay aware. We'd like to thank Dr. Sellers for his years of advocacy and for being a great example to the community. We wish him all the best in his next chapter. Until next time, I'm Megan Norman. This is Awareness.